Hello. My name is Dr. Mandy, and I am here with Scott Compton, and we are going to talk all about fasting. Of course, fasting, my favorite topic. So before we dive into some of these wonderful topics, I want Scott to introduce himself to us. Hi,
Hi,
Scott.
how are you doing?
Good. How are you? So tell the
Good.
audience about you and what got you into this.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a biologist. That's what my degree's in, and I've been fasting probably for about 14, 15 years overall now. So what's interesting about my story is that I started back. I had a lot of like obesity problems back in my 20s, and I was looking for different ways to hit it. I did fasting wrong way back in the day. This is the 1990s where I did juice fasting, and I actually experienced a lot of problems doing that. And so I kind of chalked it up to, there's nothing to this fasting stuff. Really never tried to do real actual like water or dry fasting, real traditional fasting back in those days. But then come around 2007, 2008, I started listening to a man. His name was Martin Berkman, and he's from the leangains.com society. And he was doing a lot of intermittent fasting, and it was something new. And I was like, okay, what is all this? So I researched a lot of the biology, what he was doing, and it was interesting. I started finding that somewhere around the 12, 14-hour mark, your hormones start changing. You gain more human growth hormone. Your glucose starts settling down. Your insulin levels start, pulling back, and it opens up the door for actually losing fat. So by the time like 2009, 2010 rolled around, like most people know Dr. Mercola, he started like advocating intermittent fasting. There's a lot of other people at the time, but through that window of time, I started doing intermittent fasting, and it was interesting because I noticed you doing a 16, 18-hour fast, I would no longer have issues gaining weight, even if I like overate in the day or ate the wrong things. So then I started ratcheting it up even more. Okay, I started doing 20-hour fast, 24. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel good metabolically to me. It felt like I was getting headaches, and I was feeling like I was getting sick. Even when I go to sleep at night, it would wake me up in the middle of the night. Like I had all these other issues, and I was like contemplating, well, is this right for me? What is fasting? So I really, right around 2010, started really diving into water fasting, dry fasting, and understanding what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right, thinking about how the mitochondria is working, what's shifting in the body to make myself fast correctly and not go through these weird rampant swings when I was fasting. And so by about 2013, 2014, I began really mastering fasting, and it's a period of time like it's kind of like running a marathon. You don't want to like just assume on day one or even a month in or even a year in you've got this down, because there's this concept called metabolic flexibility, and your body has to slowly adapt over time to different fuel sources, mainly from glucose over to fats. And it's a longer process that you kind of have to go through all the bumps and eventually get to the other side. And you're like, now this is 14 years ago. Right now I can like start a fast, not feel hungry, know what to expect, listen to my body, and get easily 2 or 3 days into it without any issues whatsoever. I've taken fast to 15 days several times in my life, but typically I won't. I'll only do that like once a year. I'll really just focus in on doing some intermittent fasting, and then occasionally, like once every month or two, I'll do a prolonged fast. Typically, a water fast is healthier for the kidneys rather than dry fasting. And I have different techniques I do. So I guess that's kind of a summary of the last 15 years of fasting, where I'm at, and all the stuff I've learned over the years. As a biologist, I still read on PubMed. I look into all the fasting science that's coming out, and there's so many benefits that I couldn't think not to actually weave in fast now, like just for health, for longevity, for feeling good, for my moods, for keeping the weight off, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, it's interesting about listening to your body. I'm really glad that you said that. I'm also glad that you mentioned the water fasting safer for the kidneys because there
Hmm.
are some people who fasting is contradicted for too. It's basically people with renal issues, major
Yep.
renal issues and kidney disease. They have to be medically supervised. So that's something I want people to understand. But in general, I one of the reasons why the Diet Achiever program is centered around fasting is because of what you just said, because I was thinking about what is the one thing people can do and get the most gain out of it, and it's not going to cost them any money,
Hmm.
like all these different modalities for, there's so many different things out there, ozone, and then there's like, FSM, and there's like PEMF, and people don't have the money to do all that, right? And all the supplements,
Red
right?
light therapy, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. It's expensive.
Mhm.
And, for regular people who don't have the financial accessibility, what's the one thing they can do? They can fast. And so that's why I thought this should be the center. And then everything else revolves around that. So we do have the nutrition, the exercise, the mindset, the meditation, all that is in this program. But so it's got the fasting and then everything supports it. There is science behind this, everybody. Just understand this is not some voodoo thing. We were built to do this. Our evolution was built to do this. So you talked about your experience with fasting. Can you run through, in a short summary, what you think makes it most beneficial, like why it's so effective, and throw the science in there with the mitochondria a little bit.
Yeah. So why fasting is really effective, and it's like the key way of working is if you think about like food source, I'd like to think about our food source, our access to food source first. Like in our modern era, we have access to everything all the time. Back even 100 years ago, like to like have a big meal and then like go to sleep with the sun and wake up the next morning. Typically people were doing fasting without realizing they were doing fasting. Like they'd usually get 14 hours in, probably minimum 12 hours in if they went to sleep. Their last meal, let's say, was 6 o'clock, and then they didn't get up again until 6 in the morning. They're automatically giving like probably, 12, 14, even 15 hours of fasting in daily. And our body's built for this. Now, I should kind of like back up a little bit. Children are evolving in their cells, their metabolism's a lot higher, and children, I don't believe, should really be fasting like adults do at all. Like children
Thank
are in
you.
a whole
Yeah.
different category. And I'm really talking about adults here. Like once our cell cycles are not like churning out new cells and growing the body as much, like it's a really awesome thing built into us, into our mitochondrial complex 2, which is fatty acid oxidation, which is this is where there's two parts. So if you see my hand here, like over here you have complex 1, which is glucose and metabolism, sugars. You bring in carbohydrates. Complex 1 starts working and it will create energy, right? It eventually gets through the whole chain, 5 steps in, and complex 5 at the rotor to churn out ATP from sugars and carbohydrates and all these food sources. Over here we have just fats. Even in complex 1, this is also how proteins break down too, and also come back and turn into energy for us. In complex 2, it's all about fats. And like if you think of the polar bear, right? Like is a good example. Polar bears are eating fish and meats and very little carbohydrates. So they are really like into making your energy from fats all the time. And a polar bear, believe it or not, they don't actually have to drink much water through the year. They could go months without drinking any water from any water source because fat breaks down into water and CO2. And because it breaks down into a lot of water and they're eating so many fats, they're hydrated all the time when they don't have access to water. Now, humans, we can't do that because we don't have the biology benefits like a polar bear does in their complex 2. But we can use our complex 2 to break down fats and survive and live off of breaking down fats in the body. So instead of being in a state where we're trying to like insulin tells the body to store fat. Instead of being in that state all the time when we eat glucose and we're using complex 1 primarily, we're telling our bodies after a meal to store fat, store fat, store fat, store fat. So we want to get our body into the other side of saying, use the fat, get rid of the fat, use the fat, get rid of the fat. And in order to do that, we have to be in that complex two, which is a lot of people say this is, the state of ketosis, where your body is accessing making ketones. Your brain can run off of ketones. It also runs off a little bit of glucose it needs to in your liver. If you have a healthy liver, it will do that. If you have an unhealthy liver, you're going to have a harder time fasting because you're going to have more swings. Your body might not actually be like, giving you a stream of glucose if you're fasting and using ketones all the time as well. So, but what's nice about fasting is it regenerates, it goes into autophagy. It like starts repairing organ systems. If you have kidney problems, if you have liver problems, if you have thyroid problems, gallbladder problems, like the sludge in your gallbladder, right? You can give your body a break from all these processes by fasting if you know what you're doing, if you're medically supervised as well, and you really have experience knowing and listening to your body. Like that's the biggest part. Like if you think you want to just be analytical about it and be like, I need to fast for 72 hours and that's what I'm going to do to get there. I never go into a fast that way. I always think about like, as I go into it, how do I feel in the evening when I'm going to sleep? When I wake up in the morning, do I have more energy? Believe it or not, when I'm on a fast, I feel better. It's like I don't have all this
Yeah.
stuff from the foods coming in. Yeah. So
Completely agree. And honestly, the mental clarity is amazing.
it
But that's a
is.
really good point about listening to your body because I've had it where if I'm under a lot of stress or I did get shingles one time after a fast. It just suppressed my immune system because it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right time. I went and did the 5 day and then I ended up with shingles. And I think that's red flags. You have to listen to your body. And there have been times where I've done, 3 day fast and I felt horrible after it. And there's been times where I felt amazing, and I'm like, well, what made that different? And I think a lot of it has to do with like, how much stress I had during that time. Was there anything else going on in my life? That could be, was I depleted for any reason?
Mhm.
So you do need to listen to your body because every fast could be different for you.
Layman's terms. Okay. So I would probably say the number one would be to heal the body, just in layman's terms. Like you, once you get past like about 18, 20 hours, you start turning on autophagy. And autophagy is just the process of going in and cleaning out the cellular components, making new proteins that are better, making new components that are better for your engine. View all of health is stemming from your mitochondrial function. And the reason why I have this point of view is from Dr. Doug Wallace's work. He showed back in 2013, he showed that autoimmune diseases can be triggered and other processes can be triggered when your overall energy level of your cell drops down to a certain threshold. So instead of, let's say, being at 100% efficiency, let's say you have the best mitochondria in the world, you're making as much ATP as you want. Think of it like a car engine. So, like, okay, I can rev it up and I can go as fast as I want and everything's good. But what happens if you make your engines have problems with them? And what happens if your engines start failing you and your overall mitochondria and your engine components, your mitochondrial DNA, your mitochondria has its own DNA, and that DNA can be mutated and shattered and broken in different ways, especially complex 1. And the reason why complex 1 can have more problems over complex 2 is that your mitochondrial complex 1 only gets recycled in the mitochondria, in the cell itself, where in complex 2, it crosstalks with your nuclear DNA, and the histones that bundle up your DNA protect your DNA during your cell cycles. So part of your complex 2, which is your fatty acid oxidation, that gets protected more than complex 1. And that's why a lot of books came out around 2018 talking about how you are more free radical leaky if you're dependent on carbohydrates in your diet. If you're more dependent on fats, you eat more just fatty foods or you're fasting, right? Like, like if you're if you're eating like a ketotic diet where you have very low carbohydrates and a lot of fats, then you're going to be producing more ketones in your body. And that is all coming from complex 2. So all your inflammation in your body is lowered if you're working off of complex 2 all the time versus complex 1. So your body breaks down faster when you're dependent on complex 1 with all your carbs, and you have more of a timeline, more longevity if you're using complex 2. And then if you're fasting, like I was saying, through autophagy, you can rebuild and remove out those mutated mitochondrial DNAs and replace them with daughters, like daughter DNA that's functioning better in your body. So you can literally help repair your DNA, repair your cells, throw away the junk, like all the garbage out of your cells, get things refreshed if you do a fast periodically, like, a lot of people recommend a couple times a year at least, to not build up the sludge and make the efficiency, the overall energy of the cell still high enough that you're not dropping down to a certain level that triggers an autoimmune disease to kick on
So let me interrupt
in
here because
expression.
I find that interesting about the complex 1, complex 2. So do you think with the autophagy, people
Right.
can actually be more efficient with complex 1?
Yes.
Because
And there
they're
are,
removing the damage. Not to say you should
right,
rely on it. I'm not
right.
saying
I
that.
agree.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if you're, and this is very interesting concept because I have found with people who are obese and very inflamed, they initially do very well on ketogenic diets, but then as they're losing weight and if they're using fasting as a tool, and I noticed this myself, I am noticing my carb tolerance has improved.
Oh,
So
yeah. We are omnivores. Like, I might get some heat from the vegetarian or vegan community, which
I'm an
I'm
omnivore
like, I'm
believer.
actually, I have the
I'm
notion
starting a
that,
new movement. It's called the
yeah,
omnivore
it's the
movement.
omnivore movement. But like I'm okay with anyone eating the way they want to eat. If they want to eat vegetarian or vegan, great to them. But I also think about what are they lacking in their diets, whether they're eating carnivore, whether they're, depending on what side of the spectrum they're on, and what time of year are they eating them? How are they actually using it for their body as sustenance rather than just eating it to eat it? And are they having a good time eating the food? Are they actually, is it affecting their emotions in a good way? Or they feel like really like tied up into a knot? Like, I feel like I have no control over my food and I don't feel as good when I eat. Like, you always should feel as good as possible when you're eating because that food's going in and building your body. And there's frequency attached to that, right? And you want to always have a positive frequency. That's why I think like the French have it down because it's like, the French, they have baguettes and they have all this carby food, but they're one of the thin, like slimmer people on the planet because I think they treasure their meals and they eat for like 20, 30 minutes and they just don't chop down and I'm done back to whatever technology device. It's like I'm going to have a real conversation and have real good interaction, a real connection with the person across the table from me. And we're going to slowly eat this and let our body like take this in like slowly and like how we approach our food and our relationship with our food tells us a lot about why a person like me, when I do fasting, I suddenly see that point of view. Like, oh my gosh, my relationship with my food in the past was like, just chow it down. It's just, it will do what it needs to do. And it's like a month later, it's like, why did I gain another 10 pounds? The healing process is neurological. It's also inflammatory. And this gets back to the mitochondria again. Like, you want to like reduce down all the inflammation like as much as you can in your daily life. And what really you're doing is by not eating, you're allowing like more water to come in, more toxins to be flushed out. Like this is where like medical supervision, like if you do a long fast, is really required because you might get to the point where I'm liberating off the fat off my body, but maybe I'm in an environment where the fat is there protecting me, but now I'm telling my body I need to get rid of this fat. And the reason why the fat's protecting me is that it's storing away heavy metals and other toxins and other things from my foods that I took in. And I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to liberate all of that, all those heavy metals and all these toxins into my bloodstream. And now what's my kidneys going to do if I get a huge flood of toxins at the same time. Like it's important. That's why like when a person does a dry fast, which means you eat nothing, you drink nothing. That's what a dry fast means. But a lot of people they'll start a fast with a dry fast maybe for like 24 hours and they'll get like really good benefits, but then they'll turn back on and start drinking water and go from a dry fast to a wet fast during their entire fast. Um, that's like the advanced fasting person that really knows their body and knows what they're doing. They know what's going on individually with them, and they've been medically trained in knowing about all this because you can do damage to your organs if you liberate toxins too quickly, right? Like if you know about chelation and binding up the toxins and things like that. Like one of the longer fasts I did, which was like a 12-day fast, like for instance, on day 5 through 8, I started adding in bentonite clay to my water when I was drinking my water to as the idea of like, okay, maybe this will help bind out any toxins that might be coming through my bloodstream. And I tried that and I don't know if it worked or not, but I'm like, I might as well give it a go. Personally for me, you know, I'm not saying anybody do this, but I'm thinking of like all the processes when they're happening several days into a fast and thinking about like how I feel and what might be happening in my own body, especially if you get down to that last like 20 pounds of stubborn fat. It's in those last 20 pounds where you're probably going to have more density of concentration of toxins rather than all the adipose tissue that just can like be used as fuel immediately and trickle down. Like, so your body, like, this is why like doing a really long fast, you really have to know what you're doing. Don't do this alone. If you do short fast, intermittent fast, like daily bursts, like we're kind of built for that. Periodically a 2 or 3 day fast, like I do like once every month or two for sure. I like to coincide it actually with moon cycles because it's like it helps me remember, oh, the moon is getting full. It's time to do a fast. Why would I do this during a moon cycle? Well, maybe the parasite activity in your body's higher when the moon is full. So doing a fast, the parasites have nothing to eat. Now they die off more and I get a benefit from it. So I think it just of like how we have all these processes and it's true, like the top 5 are all the different ways you're healing your body. You could be healing the parasites in your gut, that you're starving them off. You can, but then you have to remember parasites in your gut produce toxins too. So when you starve them off, they might actually have a flood of toxins into your body as to why you start a fast and you get into like maybe 24, 36 hours and you just feel like lethargic and like it's not feeling good. And like there's all these other factors that are going into it until like you do it enough, like really over longer periods of times, like years, you know more and more and more what to expect. And it's like riding a bicycle. You get right back on the bike and you're good to go. And you know if you're pushing it too hard one way or the other.